Happy birthday, America. The US of A turned 250, and the big birthday got messy pretty fast. Washington was hit with record-breaking heat, a storm evacuation, crowds sheltering in museums and government buildings. Yes, there were flags, flyovers and fireworks, the whole patriotic package. But when Donald Trump finally took the stage after being delayed by the storm, the celebration took on a decidedly political tone with a Cold War era feel.
America will never be a communist country. Won't happen. Communism is a loser, and it always will be.
During his speech on the National Mall, Trump did praise American history, war victories, the moon landing, the Wright brothers and such. But he also blurred the line between national celebration and campaign rally, using the stage to talk up his own record. He hailed operations in Venezuela and Iran as a tremendous success and used the US military for one of his usual partisan shots, suggesting the 2020 elections were rigged.
We rebuilt our military in my first term. We used it a little bit in our, actually I should say third term, but I won't do that because I don't want any controversy. But we use it and we've had tremendous success.
And that wasn't the only tension in the Capitol. Earlier in the day, the white nationalist group Patriot Front marched through Washington, while parts of the official anniversary program faced criticism for being too partisan, too religious, and too closely tied to Trump's political brand. Elsewhere across the East Coast, extreme heat and severe weather disrupted July 4th events from Philadelphia to Boston. But in Washington, the symbolism was impossible to miss. America marking 250 years of independence, divided, overheated, and already deep in its next political fight. So was this a celebration of American unity or a preview of the battles that lie ahead? We are going to dig a bit deeper into this with a political analyst in a moment. But first, let's see how Americans feel about the state of the Union. DW traveled across the US to find out how united are the states of America.
250 years is an amazing milestone for the Republic, and we're just really blessed to be able to live here. So I think we're more unified.
I feel like we are more divided, and I'll tell you exactly why. It is very easy to get ratings and get an audience by demonizing the other side. The problem really is, if we focused on the issues, that would unite us, because even if we disagreed, we would have something to work towards.
Yeah, I feel like particularly this July 4th, our country is more divided than it has been in the past.
But I think there's a lot of union because it's a celebration of the 250th birthday. So,
are we divided? Yes. Can we come together? We have to.
I feel it's pretty unified right now, especially with the 250th anniversary of America. So I think we've done a good job getting back on track of all being Americans together and celebrating what it means to be a unified country.
Without getting overtly political, there are people that don't give a hoot about this day. And I think if you live here and you're making good money here and you're free, freedom of religion, freedom to exercise many things that you can't do in 75% of the countries around the world.
Well, the media would tell you that this country isn't unified. Yet actions speak louder than words. And if you look at the actions of this country coming together, that is unification.
250. America means everything to me. I went with your second question first. It means everything to me. Where else could you see all these unified people out celebrating in the 100 million degree heat?
250 years old, I guarantee you, and I know for a fact that we ain't nowhere near as unified as our forefathers, wanted us to be nowadays as they were back then.
Well, let's bring in Scott Luca. He's a professor of American Studies at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin and joins us from there. Scott, you've studied American politics and US power for decades. When you watched Trump's 250th anniversary speech, how would you characterize the country that Donald Trump conjured up in that speech?
Let me first of all start not with Donald Trump, but with a thanks to you for going out and speaking to those people in towns and cities across America that marked the 250th anniversary, not by looking for reds under the bed, or looking for enemies in their streets, but by looking for community rather than division. Some of them hailed the idea of that community. Some of them said, well, we don't have that community right now, but we're going to seek it. I want to hold on to that before I talk about Trump's speech, because that speech, and indeed the weeks of supposed celebrations in Washington have been all about Donald Trump's ego. They've been about Donald Trump's idea that he is the most important person in America. In other words, that he is America. They have been about his idea that anyone who does not bow down to him is an enemy, is a foe, and now this new shtick, a communist. This has always been about the idea of Trump effectively trying not only to distort the Constitution, to distort politics, but to even distort the meaning of America. And that's what he did, albeit late last night with a relatively small crowd, knowing that he would get the clips this morning, which for better or for worse would be all about, first and foremost, Donald Trump.
We come to this communism issue in a moment, but first I want to ask you, historically, presidents have used July 4th to talk about unity and democratic ideals. Did Trump break with that tradition, or is he simply saying out loud what many Americans are feeling?
Well, he was he was reading a prepared speech. So, you have to make nods to that in the speech. But if you talk, and you saw it in the clips, when Trump sort of went off script or riffed off of it, it was not this notion of a unity. I mean, what he was doing is, and it's a campaign tactic. I mean, with the midterm elections only a few months away, but it was that if you are not supporting me, you're not a proper American. You are a communist. I mean, that's just simply the red baiting that I remember when I was a boy, and that goes back to the 1950s. When he talks about the fact that he should have been in his third term, that's not unifying the country. That's continuing the fraud, his fraudulent claim that the election was stolen from 2020. And even when he makes reference to the stock market, or he makes reference to the American military, it's never in the sense of that these are institutions for America. They are institutions that are great because of him. And this has always been the case. I mean, this has been the case since he was a businessman, since he ran for president in 2016, and since he took the inaugural oath in 2017, when he said, frankly, that America was carnage. That was his idea of America, and he was going to be the guy who would preside over that.
Now, I want to quickly rewind 50 years to America's bicentennial in 1976. That was another difficult moment in U.S. history. They had just been through Vietnam, Watergate, deep social conflict inside the country. But President Ford still tried to project some unity in his speech. How does that compare?
I was there. You can tell from the gray beard that 50 years ago, albeit without this beard, I remember it well. It was extremely hot, like it was yesterday in most of the United States. It was also a time when we were coming out of Watergate and the resignation of Richard Nixon, who would have been probably convicted and imprisoned had he not been pardoned. It was coming out of Vietnam. We were in the midst of what's called stagflation, which is both inflation and unemployment at the same time. It wasn't a cheerful time, but for those days in the summer of 76, especially on July the 4th, there was this idea of unity that you've talked about. This was this idea that this wasn't Democrat or Republican, left versus right, good American versus communist. There was this idea that we had made it through 200 years, that we'd made it through a lot of adversity. American history has never always been glorious, and that we would proceed, we would come out of this. Now, here we are 50 years later, and again, I make that contrast. You have that man who at the top is not talking about unity, is not talking about a regenerated America, in the sense of all Americans. And then you have those people that you talk to in the streets who said, look, we still believe in this vision. As flawed as this vision may be, we still didn't believe in this vision of America. And personally, I'll just say this to you, it's that I hold on to when we talk at America at 251 or 260, 270 or 300, that somehow America comes out of this moment and realizes, look, it's not a question of America first, definitely not America or Trump first. It's a question of America together.
Now, it looks different, though, and it feels different because the event was delayed by storms. Crowds were evacuated. People dealt with the extreme heat and there was heavy security across Washington. Symbolically, is this almost too perfect a picture of America at 250? Overheated, anxious and divided?
Well, that's not what the Trump folks want you to say, so you better watch yourself there. But the fact is these things happen, I'm not going to talk about climate change, which Donald Trump denies, and the role that it plays in it. We can save that for another time. But these things happen, celebrations get disrupted, whether it's by rain, whether it's by furious storms, whether it's by extreme heat. The question is how you cope with that, how you deal with that. And of course, there were some people who stuck it out, but Trump, in effect, is just playing to his base, whatever that is. I think in a wider context, what has sort of been disturbing at the same time as I talk about what is good in America is that we're talking about weeks of this disruption. Remember that this is a man who tried to put his name on our National Center for the Performing Arts, the Kennedy Center, that this was a man who created a non-reflecting reflecting pool on the Washington Mall. And indeed one which was immediately damaged by a liner that came loose. Remember that this is a man who's trying to construct an arch bigger than the Arc de Triomphe. Remember that this is a man who has destroyed part of the White House for a ballroom with a military bunker underneath it. All of this is for his glorification. There's an old French phrase, I think, the state, it is me. Well, Donald Trump, not just what we saw last night, is America, it is me. Come hell, come high water, come extreme heat. America, for him, is Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone.
I want to come back to what we touched upon earlier. Trump warned about communism in his speech. Let's take a listen.
America will never be a communist country. Won't happen. Communism is a loser, and it always will be. The communist system is the opposite of the American system, and the communist system has never worked. Our warriors did not fight communism on battlefields across the world, only to have that menace rear its ugly head right back here in America. We're not going to let it happen. We like to stop a threat like that immediately and before it begins. It's like a cancer. You got to cut it out. You got to cut it out fast.
Now, the Cold War has been over for more than 30 years. Why is Donald Trump still banging on about communism?
Now, let's start with the record, first of all, of 2026. There is no communist threat in America. There is no communist holding political office at national level, at state level, and I believe at local level. There's no effective Communist Party of the United States of America. There are no mass communist rallies on the streets, even though yesterday in Washington, D.C., there was a white nationalist pro-Trump rally. So why is Donald Trump saying this? Let me take you back 6 years ago on July the 4th, 2020. During the COVID pandemic and in defiance of the rules, Donald Trump went to Mount Rushmore in North Dakota and he posed in front of that historic monument that he wants to be part of, and he whipped up the idea of culture wars. Why did he do that? Desperate for election, he whipped up the idea that America was threatened by black people, threatened by people of other minorities, people of other ethnicities, people who had, different political beliefs from him, people who had different religions from him. And those culture wars he was whipping up, remember, were in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, that black American who was killed by police in Minneapolis. Now, he did not win the election despite trying to whip up culture wars, largely because of COVID. 6 years later, the economy is not doing well. He's in the middle of a failing war on Iran. His war on immigration has come on ground with the invasion of Minnesota earlier this year. So what does he do? He invokes another war, a war against a mythical enemy called communism. He tries to bring out the worst in Americans. He plays on their fears, on their historical memories, and he tries to set up the fact, because he's not talking about going after communists. He's talking about going after Democrats. He's talking about going after independents who might have a centrist or a left-wing view. He's talking about going after academia, academics, students, laborers, anybody who he thinks stands in the way of his election gets tarnished as part of this Red Scare. And I lived through part of that And my parents lived through that. And I want to remind you of one thing, if I may, and why I'm heated about this. What stopped the Red Scare in the mid-1950s, which was led by a senator named Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, who got many, many thousands of people fired, who got many, many hundreds of thousands of people blacklisted, who ended their lives, was when a brave counsel in a congressional hearing said, "Senator, have you no decency?" Does Donald Trump have any decency where he will step back from that line? I think you and I both know the answer to that question.
Now, Scott, my last question. Imagine a historian looking back at America's 250th anniversary, let's say 50 years from now. Will historians see a confident republic celebrating its founding, or a country using the language of greatness to cover up a crisis of democracy?
We don't know, because we're at one of those hinge points in history. And we've gone through a few. We've gone through 9/11 and that war in Iran in 2003. We've gone through the great financial crash of 2008, 2009. We've gone through the pandemic. And now we're at a hinge point where you have Trump and his inner circle who don't believe in the American system that has its origins in 1776. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in an effective Congress. They don't believe in an effective judiciary. They don't believe in effective agencies. They believe only in the power and in the profit that they can get. The American system has been badly bent and damaged in recent years, including during Trump's first term, but especially in his second. Does it now break? And it's whether or not that American system breaks, and whether or not the hopes of Americans break, that means not only what we will think we see when there's America at 300, but whether there will be an America at 300.
Bit of a gloomy outlook there from Professor Scott Luca, Professor of American Studies at University College Dublin. Once again, many thanks.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, viewers.
And that's it from us for today. Let us know what you think in the comments right below, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our future editions. Meanwhile, from all of us here in Berlin, many thanks.